I was the one who wrote the final record. I want you to understand what that means. Out of every scholar, every poet, every leader left alive in the galaxy, I was the one chosen to write the last words that any civilization would ever produce. A eulogy, not for one species, not for one world, but for all of it. Every thinking mind that ever looked up at the stars and wondered. I wrote their ending. My name is Kale Vishari. I am Telvanni. My people were archivists. We did not build warships. We did not conquer planets. We wrote things down. We recorded. We remembered. And when the galaxy began to die, we recorded that too. It started 200 years before I was born. The outer rim went dark first. Not in the way a star burns out, collapsing into dust with a final bright scream. No, the stars simply vanished. Entire systems folded into nothing, silently, like someone pulling a thread from a piece of cloth. One moment, a star existed with its planets and its moons and its history. The next moment there was just absence, not even empty space, something worse than empty, something that was the opposite of existing. We called it the recession. It moved inward, slowly at first, then faster, consuming the outer arms of the galaxy and pushing every living thing toward the core. The great civilizations of the galactic concord each tried to stop it in their own way. The Valith Dominion, the oldest and wisest among us, sent diplomatic vessels into the darkness, believing anything that powerful must be intelligent and could therefore be reasoned with. Their ships crossed the border and never returned. Not even a signal, not even static, just silence. The Orith Collective tried next. They were psionics, millions of minds linked together across the stars. They reached out with their thoughts, trying to understand the recession, the way they understood everything, by touching its mind. There was no mind to touch. Instead, the recession touched theirs. 7 million Orath went mad in a single moment. Their collective shattered like glass dropped on stone. The Dreth Imperium, proud and fierce, launched the greatest military fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. 12,000 warships burning toward the dark edge, with weapons that could crack a planet in half. The fleet crossed the border. The fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply erased, as though it had never existed at all. And my people, the Telvanni, did what we always did. We watched, we recorded, we wrote it all down in perfect detail, because that was the only thing we knew how to do. One by one, the species of the Concord fell silent. 47 civilizations. Some were ancient beyond measure. Some were young and full of promise. It did not matter. The recession did not care about age or wisdom or strength. It ate everything equally. By the time I sat down to write the final record, there were 6 species left, all crowded into a shrinking pocket of safe space near the galactic core. No one was fighting anymore. No one was researching. The Dreth, who once sang battle hymns before charging into combat, now sat quietly composing songs about death. The remaining Orath, broken individuals without their collective, simply stared at walls. Everyone was waiting, not for rescue, not for a miracle, just for the end. I sealed my words into a quantum beacon and launched it into the void. I wrote, "To whoever finds this, know that we lived. That is all that remains." I expected nothing. I felt nothing. Hope had not faded or weakened inside me. It had died. I want you to understand that it was not a metaphor. Hope died, and I held its body, and I wrote its obituary, and I sent it into the dark. 3 months later, I was alone on my archive station, monitoring empty frequencies the way a person might keep breathing after they have already decided that breathing is pointless. Habit. Nothing more. Then my equipment registered something. I thought it was a malfunction. I ran every diagnostic I knew. The signal was real, but that was not the impossible part. The impossible part was where it was coming from. It was not coming from the safe zone. It was not coming from any surviving system. It was coming from beyond the recession's edge, from inside the darkness, from the place where nothing existed anymore. The signal was crude. I almost laughed when I analyzed it. Modulated radio waves, electromagnetic pulses, the kind of communication technology the Concord had abandoned 10,000 years ago as primitive and inefficient. But it was structured. It was intentional. It repeated in a clear pattern. I decoded it and found 2 things. First, a sequence of prime numbers, the simplest possible proof that an intelligent mind was behind the transmission. Second, a voice. A voice speaking in a language I had never heard before, which my translation systems slowly, painfully unraveled over the course of several hours. The voice said, "This is the human vessel Eurydice. We know you are out there. We are coming. Do not give up." I had never heard of humans. I searched every record in my archive, 9,000 years of galactic history, and I found exactly one mention, a single footnote in a Valith survey log. A probe had passed through a small yellow star system on the galaxy's outer arm and detected a species in early development. Classification: pre-industrial. Predicted future: self-extinction within 2,000 local years. Assessment: no strategic value. No follow-up recommended. That was it. That was everything the galaxy knew about humanity. A footnote: a species so unremarkable that no one had ever bothered to look at them twice. And now they were transmitting from inside the darkness that had swallowed everything else. I sent the signal to every remaining frequency. The reactions were immediate. The Dreth called it a trap. The Telvanni elders called it a ghost, a phantom echo from dead space. But one of the surviving Orath, a woman named Tessith, who still had fragments of her psionic ability, reached toward the signal's origin and pulled back as though she had touched fire. She looked at me with wide, frightened eyes and said, "They are real. And they are angry." Weeks later, a ship came through the dark border. Nothing had ever crossed back from the recession. Nothing. And yet here it was, pushing through the boundary like a fist through a wall. The ship was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. I do not say that as an insult. I say it as a fact that I later came to understand as a kind of beauty. It was enormous, angular, covered in scars and welds and patches. It looked like it had been broken and repaired 100 times. It looked like it had been beaten into its shape by someone who cared nothing about elegance and everything about survival. The humans called it the Eurydice, named for a figure in their mythology who was pulled back from the land of the dead. They came aboard my station. I will never forget the first time I saw a human face to face. Captain Marin Solis was not the largest person in the room. The Dreth representatives towered over her. She was not the most graceful. She moved with a blunt, restless energy, her eyes constantly scanning, constantly assessing. But there was something in her that I had not seen in any living being for years, a quality I could not name at first. Later I realized what it was: refusal. Not courage, not bravery, refusal. A deep, stubborn, almost unreasonable refusal to accept that things could not be fixed. She told us what had happened to humanity. When the recession reached their region of space 90 years ago, humans had been a spacefaring species for barely a century. They had colonies on a dozen worlds. They had never met another intelligent species. They had no idea the Concord existed, or had fallen. They saw the stars going out, and because they had no ancient wisdom, no galactic context, no one to tell them it was impossible to fight, they simply fought. Where the Valith sent diplomats, the humans sent probes. Thousands of cheap, disposable probes, designed to transmit data for as long as possible before being consumed. Most lasted only seconds, but seconds of data were enough. They discovered that the recession was not a force or a creature or a judgment. It was a frequency, a resonance pattern that caused the fabric of space itself to come apart, a vibration that unmade reality at its most basic level. They could not stop it, but they found, almost by accident, that their own primitive electromagnetic technology created interference patterns that disrupted the recession's frequency. The Concord's advanced systems had been too clean, too refined, too elegant. The recession was tuned to consume exactly that kind of technology. But human technology was messy, chaotic, full of noise and static and inefficiency, and that noise acted like a wall of interference against the recession's signal. Captain Solis explained it to me with a smile that showed her teeth. "Your people built beautiful systems," she said, "perfect and precise, and the recession cut through them like a blade through silk. Our technology was garbage by your standards. Loud, clumsy, full of errors. But you cannot cut static with a blade. You can only shout louder. And we are very, very good at shouting." Over 90 years, they had built what they called the Orpheus Array, a network of massive electromagnetic disruptors that could hold the recession's boundary in place. Not reverse it, not yet, but hold it. They had been living inside the darkness for decades, carving out pockets of stable space with noise and stubbornness. and when their sensors detected our fading signals, they came to help. I asked Marin why. Why risk everything for species they had never met? She looked at me as though the question confused her, and said, "Because where we come from, when the ship is sinking, you do not charge people for seats on the life raft." What followed was something the galaxy had never seen. Humans shared their technology freely, without conditions. They asked for nothing in return. This confused every remaining species, because the Concord had always operated on negotiation and leverage. The humans did not seem to understand that concept, or if they did not care. Together, the combined civilizations discovered that the recession had not been natural. It had been triggered accidentally, thousands of years ago by a Valith experiment in higher dimensional energy. At the origin point, deep in the consumed zone, there was still a machine running, broadcasting the frequency that was unraveling the galaxy. If it could be reached and shut down, the recession could be stopped, and possibly reversed. A joint fleet entered the darkness. Humans led the way because they knew how to survive in it. I went with them. I told Marin that someone had to write it down. She smiled again with all her teeth and said, "Then write it like we are going to win." I had never written that way before. I decided to learn. The journey through the consumed space was a thing I cannot fully describe. Reality felt wrong inside the darkness. Geometry bent in ways that made my eyes ache. Time moved strangely. The ships groaned as though in pain. But the humans handled it with a calmness that I slowly realized was not calm at all. It was practice. They sang. They played games. They argued about trivial things. They filled the wrongness with noise, and I understood then that they did not conquer the dark. They were simply too loud for it to silence them. We reached the machine. The battle to approach it was devastating. Ships were lost. Corridors of stable space collapsed. But the humans held the line. Inside the structure, we found that shutting it down required someone to operate the counter-frequency array manually from within. The radiation would be fatal. It was a one-way task. 3 human engineers volunteered before anyone else could speak. They did it casually, not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures. One of them, a young woman named Asha, looked at me and said, "Write it down, Archivist. Write that we chose this." I wrote it down. The machine went silent. Across the galaxy, the recession shuddered and began, slowly, to retreat. Stars would return, space would heal. It would take centuries, but the dying was over. When I returned to my station, I opened the final record, the eulogy I had written for all intelligent life. I deleted every word. In its place, I wrote something new. Not a record, not a chronicle. Something my people had never written before. A beginning. I wrote, "Hope did not die. It was merely lost, drifting in the darkness on a crude electromagnetic frequency, carried by a species no one remembered, aboard a ship named for a woman pulled back from death. They came for us, not because we deserved it or earned it. They came because someone had to. I am Kale Vishari. I am the archivist of the Telvanni. And this is no longer the final record. This is the first."